In a previous lesson, you learned about different types of motivation, extrinsic motivation and intrinsic motivation. And today I'm going to talk to you about the role of a lesson plan in motivation. And I believe a lesson plan is crucial to motivation. And because it's something that we provide and we teach the lesson, this is directly related to extrinsic motivation. I believe that success and motivation go hand in hand. I'm sure if you think of something that you've done in your life that you were successful in, you've wanted to do more of it. You're motivated to do more of it. It doesn't matter if it's tough, it doesn't matter if it's hard, but you've experienced success in it, so you would like to do some more. And that's what is the same in a language lesson. If students are successful at retaining and using the language, they'll feel successful, therefore motivated to come back and learn more, even if it is tough. They'll grow to like English and want to study more. That will make our life as a teacher much easier, because as we know, unmotivated students can look like this, or even this in the worst case scenario, and I've had my few of these. And a motivated student will look like this. And can you imagine what it would be like if we could have a lot of students who are very motivated in my class, in our classes? And this is where the lesson plan comes in. So today what I'm going to talk about is, or share with you, is things that I think about when I prepare a lesson plan, that I think are very important and have a direct relation to the level of motivation and success in the classroom. So the first thing in a lesson plan is the goal. What do we want students to achieve in that lesson? If you think of getting into your car to go on a long trip and you have a GPS, what is the very first thing that you plug into your GPS? It's your destination, it's your goal, it's where you want to go. And it's exactly the same thing in a lesson plan. So I always use the phrase, at the end of the lesson, my students will be able to blank, and then I fill that in. Once I fill that in, I now know my destination, and I can now go about figuring out what I'm going to do to best reach that destination. And those things are numerous, and now I'll share a few of them with you. The first thing is the amount of language that we teach. Of course, if we teach too much language, students won't be able to retain it. They won't be able to remember it. They won't be able to use it, and they will become discouraged and feel unsuccessful and therefore not be motivated. On the other hand, if we teach too little language, students won't be challenged, therefore they won't have a chance to feel successful because they know it already. What have I learned, they'll be thinking, and therefore unmotivated and become bored. And especially with young students, this boredom is always an issue, because then this is a chance for them to start acting out. And then the class can become more of a classroom management nightmare than a lesson where we're actually sharing and teaching the students language. If we teach just the right amount of language, our students will feel challenged. They'll be able to retain it. They'll be able to use it in a task that we provide for them to use it in, and they will thus feel successful, smart, and therefore motivated. I think in my teaching career, the most wonderful thing I've ever had happened to me was an adult student who I taught to read and write, and she said to me, for the first time in my life, I feel that I'm smart. And just knowing that you're smart, I think, is an amazing gift that we can give our students, helping them feel smart. So if we provide language in the correct amount, in the right amount for their level, they will then be able to feel successful and therefore smart. The next thing that I always consider is the level of the language that I'm going to introduce, because if the amount of language is okay, but the level is incorrect, we still are not providing a platform for student success. If the level is too high, again, students won't be able to retain it, they won't be able to understand it, they won't be able to work with it. Therefore, they'll feel unsuccessful and therefore possibly become discouraged and feel demotivated. On the other hand, if the level is too low, they won't feel challenged because they know it already and will lead to possibly boredom, messing up classroom management issues, and lack of motivation. However, as with the level of the language, if the level is appropriate, the students will be challenged, they will be able to retain the language, they'll feel encouraged, successful, and motivated. So, two crucial things so far: the amount of language that we choose to teach in one lesson and the level of that language need to be just right. We need to think very carefully about those two in our lesson plans. So if we go back to the analogy of a trip, we plug in our destination so we know where we want to go. Now there are many ways that we can get there, and we may as well get to that destination in a fun way rather than a boring or uninteresting way. So I always think in planning my lesson, now I know my goal, I know the level of the language, I know the amount of language, I know I have that just right. Now I am wanting to have my students enjoy my class, because if my students enjoy the class, hopefully they'll learn to like English. In many of the classes that I taught, students were made to go to English class. They were not there of their own free will, and when they started my class, they really weren't interested. So if we can help our students learn to like English and enjoy the classes, hopefully it will lead to greater motivation to have them want to come back to our class and learn more. So some things that I do in hoping to get my students interested as they practice the language and use the language is to involve them in the learning and the practicing by getting them to think. There's a very wonderful saying that says, I hope I can remember this accurately, tell me and I remember, tell me and I forget, teach me and I remember, involve me and I learn. Involve me and I learn. And I've realized this is true based on my own learning. And I think if we involve students in their learning, then the success that they have in that learning is going to be greater. And how do I involve my students in their learning? Well, I try to always have, even at the lowest level, I always try to have a thinking task where I'm not only asking them to check that I know that they know the word, but for example, matching the word orange to an orange flashcard, or me saying orange and they pick up the picture of the orange flashcard. But once I know they know the words, by having them think about it, by, for example, having them categorize. So if they know the names of some fruits and they know the names of some vegetables, I then get them to put those into two columns, fruit and vegetable. And they have to think about this as they are doing the task. Therefore, they're more involved in the task. And therefore, once the task is finished and they've been successful at it, they'll feel smart. They'll feel that they really achieved this, and they will feel motivated. And this can be done at any level, right from the lowest level, from the young children up to our highest level of students that we teach. Another one I do is simple analogies, and this is again a task that can be done from the very young ones up to the older ones. And it's simple analogies. For example, yellow is to color as apple is to fruit. And again, you can see the students have to think of the answer. By thinking of the answer, they're really involved. When they come up with the answer, they're going to feel smart, therefore successful, therefore motivated. And again, this is a task. These simple analogies can be done even from the younger students. Another thing I do is always include peer and group work in my classes, and I think there are many advantages to this. And the two main advantages that I think are most of the classes that I teach and have taught have had multi-level students in them, which leads to some students being bored, some students being discouraged, because we can't keep everybody happy all the time. So when I do pair and group work, it's a chance for me to have stronger students work with the students that aren't that strong. So at that moment, everybody's involved, everybody's challenged. And the other wonderful thing that I find happening is in the pair and group work, often it's personalization tasks, but even if it isn't, the students are interacting with another student in the class that they possibly have never interacted with before. And what happens with that is a little relationship starts forming. And what happens is once those relationships evolve and the students get to know each other better, then a class atmosphere starts to be better. Students want to be with each other. And when we have a great class atmosphere, that's a wonderful environment for learning. And students will learn more in that class. And when the class environment is good, students will want to come back to that class, leading to greater motivation because there will be greater success in learning. Another part that factors into this is in one class we have students with different learning styles. I know that I learn best with visuals, so I like to write things down, I like to look at pictures. So in one class I always try to include, both in my presentation and in my practice and use of the language, a way that I will be showing a visual. I will provide an audio, whether it's myself or the CD, and I will also have some time when students will be moving or doing something. That's the kinesthetic. And we all have our own learning styles, so we learn best when we are taught with that style. So if I include the visual, the auditory, and the kinesthetic, hopefully I'm going to reach more of the students and they will be able to absorb more because they are getting it in their learning style. So this is another part of my lesson plan, and I hope by including those, the VAKT, the visual, auditory, and kinesthetic in my lesson plan, that again I'll be reaching more students. Hopefully they'll get the language and be able to use it more and better, and therefore be able to, and therefore feel more motivated. So, a quick recap. The first thing in a lesson plan that is extremely important is to know that a lesson plan has a direct effect on motivation. Our lesson plan needs to have a goal. The goal needs to be achievable. And the goal needs to state very clearly students will be able to blank. Once we know the goal we're going to, we then choose the correct amount of language, we choose the correct level of the language, because if we get those just right, the majority of the students will feel successful, they'll be able to do what we want them to do, and therefore feel motivated. And I also think in my lesson plans, how can I make this as interesting as I can for my students so that they'll enjoy English and learn to like English? And those include getting students to think about the language I've just taught. I include visual, auditory, and kinesthetic presentation and practice tasks, and I always use group and pair work in my classes. And hopefully, in my classes, if I do all that, what I've found is I have less of this and more of that. And thank you very much for your time, and I wish you best of luck in your lesson planning.